The story begins with a couple who head out on an adventurous trip to a deserted part of the forest. Darkness looms all around, and an eerie silence fills the air. Just as they are about to have some fun, a terrifying accident suddenly occurs. 2 weeks later, the boy's sister Piper shows up at the police station and asks how far the investigation has gone. But the officer tells her that whoever goes into that forest never comes back. Out of fear, they never even sent a team there. Piper gets furious and storms out of the police station. Piper was also pregnant, and she made a big decision to go into the terrifying Jacksonville forest with her husband and 2 friends. But little did they know this would turn out to be the biggest mistake of their lives. To avoid getting lost deep inside the woods, they marked the trees along the way. After walking for a long time, they decided to camp there since it was getting dark and everyone was tired. They split the work among themselves to set up the tent. One of the girls went to collect firewood, but as she bent down to pick up some wood, she suddenly realized her companion had disappeared. Then in the distance, a strange shadow flashed through the bushes. At first, she thought it was just her boyfriend playing a prank, but this was no game. As night fell, they set up the tent and tried to rest. Suddenly, they began hearing strange noises. One guy bravely stepped outside, only to see a terrifying witch in a black cloak standing in front of him. Before he could even react, the witch struck with lightning speed, slicing off his tongue and then mercilessly killing him. The others rushed out, only to find their friend's fresh corpse. Now fear was written all over their faces. They decided it wasn't safe to run through the forest at night. If the witch chased them, she could pick them off one by one. So the 3 of them agreed to stick together and make it through the night. In the morning, they packed their things and decided to leave. But after walking a little while, they made a shocking discovery. They were looping back to the same spot over and over. The witch had turned the forest into a terrifying trap. The marks they carved into the trees made it clear. They had ended up right back at their campsite. But the shocking part was that the friend who had been hanged from the tree branch earlier, his body had now mysteriously disappeared too. Seeing this, everyone was terrified. The girl screamed in anger and fear. If your stupid brother hadn't brought us here, none of this would have happened. The fight between the 2 friends was about to get worse when another companion stepped in and said, "Stop it. Fighting won't solve anything." But the fear of losing her boyfriend and being trapped in this forest had already broken the girl's spirit. She walked over to the nearby pond and splashed water on her face. Suddenly, the water in front of her eyes turned blood red. Seeing this, she screamed in horror and ran to call her friends. "Piper, help me!" she cried. Just then, she saw the shadow of the same witch in the distance. The girl was about to collapse while screaming when one of her friends rushed in, grabbed her, and pulled her back. But in the struggle, a sharp branch tore through the skin on her arm, ripping out a chunk of flesh. The sight of her blood-soaked arm made everyone freeze in shock. Piper quickly wrapped her arm with a bandage. But Mallory was convinced that the thing pulling her wasn't human. The others dismissed it as nonsense, though deep down, they too were terrified, because there was no way to explain what was happening. The next morning, they all decided it would be best to follow the path near the pond. Maybe it would lead them out, but even after walking for a long time, they couldn't hear any sound of water, and a new horror emerged. Large worms were crawling all over Mallory's wounded arm. A friend gathered courage, cleaned the wound with alcohol, and bandaged it again. Mallory kept screaming in pain, but at least the infection had to be stopped. As they moved ahead, a foul stench filled their noses. They thought maybe an animal carcass was nearby, but when they pushed aside the leaves in front of them, they were stunned. It was their own sister-in-law, Tash. Selena's phone was still on, and it showed the last recorded video, their brother being attacked, but it didn't reveal who the attacker was. Piper broke down crying for her brother, but then she noticed Mallory standing still, staring silently at the sky. Within seconds, a mysterious force lifted her into the air, and her screams echoed throughout the forest. Piper and Code ran to save her, but Mallory vanished right before their eyes. Their fear had now turned into madness. And then in the thick, dark forest, a strange voice echoed. After their friend's death, only Piper and Cody were left in the forest. Terrified and shaken, the 2 ran until they reached an old wooden cabin. The woods outside were already dangerous, so they decided this would be the safest place to spend the night. But around midnight, Cody suddenly woke up. He saw strange, terrifying symbols appearing on the walls by themselves. These markings didn't look like anything a normal person would write. They seemed to be part of some dark, occult ritual. Panicked, he shook Piper awake and whispered, This place is a witch's temple." Just then, the cabin began to shake violently, as if some invisible force was rocking it. Cody was suddenly gripped by a mysterious power, his breath choking as if life was being drained out of him. They both knew the only choice was to run without looking back. In the silence of the forest, another horrifying sound echoed, a woman's shrill, piercing laughter. Piper turned and saw the witch standing silently right behind her. But strangely, the witch didn't attack. Instead, she vanished, leaving them shaken but alive. By dawn, they had somehow survived the night. A little farther ahead, they found signs of human presence. An old campsite with a broken-down van. Inside the van, they discovered an old man, barely alive, his body covered in marks of brutal torture. Piper searched the area and came across a radio. She tried to call the police, but all that came through was a disturbing, static-like screech. Losing hope of rescue crushed their spirits even more. With trembling hands, the old man pointed toward a gun lying nearby. Cody realized the man could no longer bear the pain. He placed the gun in his hand and quietly stepped outside. But the real nightmare was only just the beginning. Since the encounter with the witch, Piper had been suffering from a sharp, constant pain in her stomach. Cody thought it was just hunger and thirst. Determined to help, he set out alone to find food and water. After hours of wandering, he finally remembered the dry riverbed he had been searching for the past 2 days. Suddenly, that very river appeared right in front of him. But as soon as he stepped forward, his foot slipped and he fell down. The moment he hit the ground, a sharp branch, shaped almost like a horn, pierced straight through his leg. Piper rushed over and somehow managed to free him, but the wound was so deep that one of his legs was now completely useless. Without help, he couldn't go anywhere. Cody was so badly injured that he couldn't even lift himself off the ground, let alone stand. Piper propped him up against a tree trunk and tried to drag him back up. But then a new tragedy struck. What was strange this time was that the witch didn't chase Piper at all. Instead, she let her wander alone in the middle of the forest. A little while later, Piper felt unbearable pain in her stomach. Right then, the witch appeared in front of her. But instead of killing her, the witch cast some black magic on her. Maybe because of the baby growing inside her. And this is where the real story of the forest begins. Back in 1865, the most beautiful girl in the village, Selena, lived here. She was every young man's dream. But Selena married a poet much older than her. Unfortunately, Selena could never become a mother. After repeated miscarriages, she began to fall apart. In despair, she turned to black magic. Slowly, the dark arts consumed her soul, and one day, in her desperate desire for a child, she began sacrificing humans. When her husband discovered the truth, he saw with his own eyes Selena drenched in blood, offering humans as sacrifices. He immediately told the villagers everything. Furious, the villagers dragged Selena out of her house and hung her from a tree in the forest. But her soul never rested. She returned in an even more terrifying form, and ever since, continued to claim the lives of anyone who dared to enter the forest. At the end of the film, we see Piper somehow making it out of the forest alive. The shocking part is that the witch spared her life. This clearly means the witch has taken possession of Piper's body and her unborn child. In other words, Piper has now become the witch's new form, and that's where the story ends. The film leaves us with a message. In old times, a woman's greatest identity was limited to becoming a mother. And even today, many societies still hold on to this belief. But the question remains, if a woman is only seen as a machine to produce children, can she really be called human? Let me know your thoughts in the comments section. Also subscribe to this channel for more horror stories like this.